grew up in LA. I was a part of early on in my days. I was aspired to be a talent agent, and I think about it as how do I cast Bryce in a role within my organization based on understanding his shape, where he will shine. Well, he'll become a star. And so when you feel like I care about you becoming a star, as opposed to you're going to be this position, these are your responsibilities, this is your title, and this is how you get judged, which minimizes your potential, everything I just said, then you're not, the full asset that you can be for the organization, for the people you're trying to serve.
For many, the pinnacle of achievement is landing a gig as the top dog. And maybe you've wondered what it's like in the C-suite. Welcome to Chief, where we talk with accomplished leaders to hear about their rise to the top. Moments of discovery, the truths and triumphs that have made them successful, and uncover the real truth about being boss. I'm Bryce Conlon, and I'll be your host. This is Chief. Hey, welcome back to Chief. My name is Bryce Conlon, and today I am excited, overwhelmingly excited to talk with Mark Chassman. Mark has had an enviable career in some very well-known companies such as AOL back in its heyday, and was instrumental in helping a little startup called Facebook right around the time of its founding. Now he is the co-founder of the Emerging Leaders Initiative, which helps grow leaders in their influence through Christ-centered leadership. He's a personal friend of mine and a force for good in my life. So Mark, thank you for joining me.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, Bryce. I'm really excited about your creation, the birth of Chief, and to be a part of it. We have an opportunity to, bring whatever enlightenment we can to those who are trying to aspire to greater things and maximize their potential. And this is fantastic. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So Mark, I think the question that I want to ask you first, and I kind of know the answer to this already, having known you, but yes. I think it's important that we define words, that we actually use words that then we give meaning to rather than assume everyone knows. So I want to ask you very personally, how do you define leadership and what does it mean to you?
Well, I find it really simply is influence. I believe that everybody has the ability, has been designed and created with influence. Some of us are more intentional about refining it, growing it, so that we can have greater influence over the things in our lives. And I feel that it's something that can be developed and can be grown from the earliest stages of our lives. We use influence. When we're infants, we use our influence to get fed. We use our influence to get changed. We use our influence to get people's attention. And in those early days, we usually use crying or some form of very aggressive communications without words to get people's attention, to influence them, to act and do things in the way that ultimately serve us. And then over time, we hope that we evolve from there to have greater influence in all aspects and other aspects of our lives.
Yeah, I was going to say some of us still have not moved through that crying phase. We still just default there, I think. So you are of the mind then, and I'm putting words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you are of the mind then that leadership is a skill to be learned rather than an innate gift or characteristic bestowed upon the lucky few. Is that?
Absolutely. I feel, what has happened, I think, in our world or in our culture is that we made leadership a thing only for certain people, either certain people who innately they tend to go about, bossing people or moving people or pushing people in a direction that they want to go. And I believe that gives the word kind of an elitist representation, which is unfortunate because as a result, people don't think they have influence, or people don't believe they can change the dynamics of their lives through influence because they're not leaders. And I think that's unfortunate that people bought into that premise that leadership is for certain people, but it's not me.
Yeah, I love your definition, your working definition of it, that it is just influence, because it opens up the door to everyone to become a leader, regardless of what your title says. And in fact, I would make the statement that a lot of people who have the titles that indicate leadership aren't actually leaders at all, are they?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I spent 25 years in corporate America. I had bosses. Unfortunately, I would say that very few of them, in my mind, were people that I wanted to follow as leaders. But because they were in a position where they controlled my employment, my salary, my promotion, that they were in essence given the title or given the grace of leadership or leader by others who had anointed them into those positions. But if I did not have a paycheck or a promotion tied to them, I would follow them anywhere.
Let's talk about that, because I think that you're tapping into something really interesting, that leaders effectively inspire other people to follow, right? And it's that idea that you're not a leader if you're going in a direction and you turn around and there's nobody behind you, you're not actually leading anybody anywhere. You're not really a leader, despite what your title, your position.
Perfectly said. I think that there are components, and inspire is absolutely one of them. But I think even if you take the word influence and you break it down into, the various different initials, where I look at the I part of influence is investment. So their intention is to invest in another being so that that being can become more than who they are. And in that investment, that they get a return. The return is that they have, in a work environment, an employee who, right, is inspired because their boss is willing to invest time and energy in helping them become all that they can be within the framework of the work that they're doing. And so to influence is to first decide in an intentional way that you want to invest in people.
Yeah. So let's dig deeper into that now. How do I, right? So I'm a business builder, right? I'm building my organization. I have employees who work for me. We have a real problem that we solve in the world for real clients. We're profitable, but I want to grow that influence. How practically can I grow that influence? Because I hear that, right? And I think we all kind of know that, right? It's the give to get model. But it gets lost. I think on a lot of business builders, we don't know how to connect those dots, and we can agree with it conceptually and intellectually. But when it comes down to the nuts and the bolts, the day to day, how do I practically go to my team, like right now, as soon as we hang up this call, and make that investment in them so that they get to not just do better work, but actually be better?
That's a great question. And it starts out with an answer that sounds, again, logical and simple and makes a lot of sense, but then there's breaking it down into practicality. So here it is. It's know your people. Now, in the Emerging Leaders Initiative, which is part of something that I've co-founded, we focus a lot of energy on this aspect of helping invest in people. And this aspect is to help them get to know who they are, and so that their leaders can help to know who they are. And so we have the framework that we've adopted is not ours. It's pretty much a framework that was broken out by Rick Warren in his whole teachings of a purpose-driven life, which we call SHAPE. If we can understand our people, the people we're trying to invest in, understand their shape, then we can better use our understanding of their shape to help that person become an asset for our organization. So we break down SHAPE as S is understanding their strengths. And we use a Gallup framework for understanding people's strengths. And then the H is really what's at the heart of who they are, meaning what moves their hearts to do things. What's the motivations behind what they do and why they do. And so understanding that. A is kind of the aptitudes. What are the kind of the skill sets that are less about what they've learned, but more about what they really enjoy applying, the applications or the aptitudes that they enjoy applying to their work. So there's the P part, let's see, well, there's the A part, and then the P part is the personalities. We all have personalities. Usually we think of them as introverted or extroverted, more thinking than feeling, more feeling than thinking. So there's the dynamics of their personality, and then there's experiences. And I think the experiences are probably the most interesting part of understanding people, which really takes time, because depending on how old that particular person is, how long they've been on this earth, they've had more experiences. And so getting to know how those experiences shape the individual in the way that they do what they do just takes time and real interest. And so therefore the investment on behalf of the leader is having a curiosity, a natural curiosity about people and wanting to get to know them better. And then over time, getting to understand their experiences, which ultimately are, lean into what their shape is. And then what we want to do as leaders is we want to understand that shape so we can then put it to work, align with our mission, the problem we're trying to solve, to, the best of our ability to create that alignment, because that's when they're at their best. That's where they bring their most to the organization. And that's where they feel the things that most people go into work outside of the paycheck for, which is not, just the paycheck, but they look for much more meaning. That's when they feel most alive.
Yeah, I love the idea of the genuine curiosity, right? Where it's not about trying to build a framework or a program and then shove you into it. It seems like it's more about taking care of the individual on a heart level, and giving them a sense of being known, and also being needed. Like, do you find that in this process, when you help someone understand who they are, that you're better equipped to provide them with successes, with tasks that they can succeed at, with opportunities that'll align well with what they can do, where they're naturally gifted, or where their aptitudes are aligned, or their heart is, and they're excited about that? Do you find that when you know them and they know them, then they can start to find their own place in the organization?
Absolutely. I mean, what we stopped doing is trying to give people titles based on some kind of hierarchy that we set up within our organization. But I like to think of it, I grew up in LA. I was a part of, early on in my days, I was aspiring to be a talent agent. And I think about it as, how do I cast Bryce in a role within my organization based on understanding his shape, where he will shine? Well, he'll become a star. And so when you feel like I care about you becoming a star, as opposed to you're going to be this position, these are your responsibilities, this is your title, and this is how you get judged, which minimizes your potential, everything I just said, then you're not, the full asset that you can be for the organization, for the people you're trying to serve, which customers. If I take that little bit of mindset and I orient it toward what I just said there, how can I cast Bryce in a role where he can become a star? It's a completely different dynamic. To your point, it has to be genuine. Leaders, people of influence, they show up and they truly do care about that they're trying to help become stars. If they don't, they shouldn't have them there.
You just used a word that I use a lot, and it's asset. You said if you're not doing this, if you're not taking the time to invest in your people, then you are not developing them into an asset. And what I hear is, if they are not an asset, meaning, and I define that as something that makes you money, right? At the end of the day, that, or maybe better put, is something that moves you towards your goal, whatever your goal might be. Because this applies in nonprofit work, this applies in family life, it applies in everything, right?
Yeah.
So the asset is something that moves you closer to your goal. If they're not an asset, they're a liability, right? And there's something that's costing you. They're moving you further from your goal. It's costing you time. It's costing you emotional energy. It's costing you capital to actually keep them engaged. So if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're really saying is, by slowing down and getting to know the individual and help them know themselves, then you are able to not only maximize your own goals and accelerate towards your own goals, but you're really able to help them show up every day as part of the team, as somebody who can really give.
I think that, a little bit of adjustment on the definition of asset, because asset, right, in the context of finances, is absolutely the ability to, bring money consistently and continually into, right, the business. I think an asset in terms of people is, yes, that's it, but I look at it more of they throw off value. They bring value to the organization. They bring value to their customers. They bring value, and it's a more holistic kind of a thought, right? You talked about energy. People who work for us, do we think about, are they an asset in that they give me energy and they give the organization energy, right? So let's use this, use an example again, for those of us who are sports fans, how has consistently, as somebody who's leading on the field like a Tom Brady, been able to do what he's done? And I would argue that he is an asset as a human being to the team because he brings an energy. Obviously he helps the team become better and then the team wins, but he brings an energy to the people around him that is infectious, that takes their playing their game up another level. Well, on a balance sheet that's just finance driven, how do you measure that? So my point would be, well, you can measure that in the game wins and losses, but you can't really measure that in terms of what kind of energy do they bring to the organization overall and the other people within it. And so there's another element I think that people bring when we evaluate them as assets that's important, energy being one of them. It's just an example. There are others, but that would be one.
I love that you're taking such a holistic approach to kind of all of these topics, right? Because it is easy to reduce people, our people, the people who are in our employ, to kind of units of production, right? It's just, did you move X number of product from here to here? Did you check these many boxes between this date and this date? And what I'm really taking away from this conversation is we need to look at the whole human, right? We need to look at everything about them and kind of not in a one-time way either. It's in a kind of ongoing way because people change, like life happens, and being able to fit that into, like see our people that way is really a kind of I think it's flipping the model on its head. Using seeing our employees as people who give value. I think many times the kind of the common thought is, how do I extract value from this person? And I'm really, my brain is actually having a hard time making some of this flip because it's a really different way of thinking about it. Very
much so. And the challenge again, as you said, is you use this word change. So we're talking about human beings. And in most cases, if we're looking at businesses, that the number one expense for running your business are your human capital. But we're talking about humans. And so to your point, humans are constantly evolving and they're constantly changing because life is happening around them. And so even though they show up giving you 8 hours of their talents, their shape to try and achieve things that you're trying to achieve with your business, they can't disconnect them from the other 16 hours of what's going on in their world. And we tend to do that in the way that a lot of businesses and leaders tend to lead. It's like, leave that stuff at the door. Here's what your role is. Here's what your job is. And then just, the idea is put your head down and push through it. And that happens more often than not. Unfortunately, that's, minimizing the potential of the people and therefore the organization. And as somebody who invests, it's minimizing the potential for all those stakeholders who actually are trying to invest in what they think is an organization, a business that's going to solve great problems in the world. And so I think that when we don't care about them as people, we don't care about the things that happen in their lives that affect them and affect us. Simple example would be life events. So life events are happening all the time. They could be anything from just got married, just had a child, my father just died. My child is sick, is in the hospital, didn't know, they just got a disease. I mean, this is human. These are things that happen to humans. If we don't consider or care about those things, then they not only affect them, but they affect our business. In the case of caring about those, then we can manage around them, with our other people, giving them opportunities to grow in other areas and again, back to the more holistic approach to things. But it takes a desire to truly put the people and investing in them so that they will want to invest in the business first.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? Because I'm sure that somebody that's hearing this is thinking, well, I don't have any margin right now, right? Like I'm leading my organization. We're under the gun. I've got the board of directors who's breathing down my neck. I got stakeholders I got to take care of. I got bottom lines that need to get met. I don't have the time to put in, to think about, Dave in accounting, who his brother's in the hospital in a different state. I like, how do I reconcile those two things? I don't have the time to slow down enough, because this is a huge ask. What you're proposing is not a small task. It's not a
That's right.
it's not a quick, program, check the 3 boxes, you can do it in an hour and move on with your day. This is a time and labor intensive ask. So what do you say to that? What do you say to that leader who's just, they're so under the gun, they're so underwater, and now it feels like the request is, give of all this time and energy that you may not have yourself.
Yes.
To invest in somebody else. What do you say to that person?
Well, I wouldn't say anything other than I ask them, what are their priorities? And I would ask them, based on those priorities, are those priorities yielding you the results that you hope for? Because the point is convincing anybody to behave a particular way that doesn't make sense. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything, but I would ask them questions to try and help them discern whether or not their priorities, which are getting their attention and their time, are the things that are yielding the results that they expect. And if they are, then no need to change. I guess it's working. But for those who are saying, hey, I'm not yielding my results that I expect, people are leaving left and right, and it's really getting frustrating. I don't feel energized by, my work, and I don't think others in this organization are feeling that too. I think they're feeling overloaded and burdened. Well, when we start looking at the ills that are created within organizations, now we can have conversations about, right? Because now there's pain, and that's when people want to think about maybe changing what they're doing.
Sure.
Now we have conversations about what might need to change.
Interesting.
But my point being, if somebody says, I don't have time and I don't need this and everything's going great, then my response would be, amen.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Sure.
That's awesome. No need to change.
Yeah.
But for those who are feeling the pain of these dynamics that we're talking about, especially when it comes to meeting expectations, which is really what a CEO's role is. CEO's role is every day is about, how do I meet the expectations of all of these stakeholders? Everything from, if I'm a public company, to shareholders, to, right, if I'm a private company, to people who might have invested in me, even though I'm a private company or this business, to my employees, to our spouses who are there saying, how's this going and what's going on? So in managing all of those stakeholders, I would say that if things are going well, then wonderful. You're meeting your expectations in all areas of your relationships with your stakeholders. But in areas where you're not meeting expectations when it comes to areas of your stakeholders, now the opportunity to have this conversation about priorities and how we might want to shift our priorities and what we might need to do in order to make that happen can be a real conversation.
There you are, back to the holistic person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, everything that this is an evolution for me. When I was first given my first opportunity in a corporate way to actually be given people to lead and manage, I was horrible.
Okay, so tell me about that, because I think maybe more of us can relate to that part than maybe the getting it all right part. So tell me more about the horrible part.
I'll tell you how horrible I was.
Yeah. Okay.
At 32 years of age, I was given an opportunity to go and turn around a business that was in receivership, or basically was bankrupt. It was a broadcast television stations that were actually in Alaska, Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau. They were ABC affiliated television stations, and the prior owners had bankrupted those stations. So I was part of an organization that was about buying and operating television stations back in 1990. I think I got there in 1995. And I was 32 years old, and my partner said, Mark, you want to go up there and try and turn this thing around and make it profitable? And I said, absolutely, send me up. And so I went up there, and I did my due diligence on what I thought was wrong, what I thought needed to be fixed, and I pretty much determined that the people were bad. that they're just bad people. They just can't do the work that needs to be done. We're up in Alaska. They care more about fishing and hunting than they care about this business. So we just need to get rid of all of them and try and find new people who, care about things beyond that. I found out in a rude way very quickly that changed nothing. And literally I was, now in Alaska, I'm born and raised a Californian, literally in the cold, in the dark, a new experience that I had never had. Not only in terms of the weather, but in the cold and the dark in terms of my work-related experience, having no idea how to actually influence or lead a group of people. And I came to that realization in a very, very hard way. I mean, it was one of those, I'm a fraud. I'm a fake. I don't know how to do this. And didn't really feel like I had the kind of support that was there to truly be authentically real about my ineptness to get righted on how to approach things. Who are the companies that are leaders of organizations that have done things really well, really great. I think that one of the first books I read was Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Great book.
I was trying to go, I'm horrible. How do I go from horrible to good so I can then go to good to great? And I was trying to learn from these guys. And I actually invited some, consultants in for a period of time not to work on the business, but to work on me, which was helpful. I actually started getting some coaching as well outside of, my community of people that I did know, because I didn't think none of them were really good at that. And that really helped me. And really the help was in completely shifting my mindset and completely transforming my thinking on what I call getting away from majoring in minor things, which is a tendency of what business schools tend to teach us. Here are the major things they say, but they're really the minor things, to majoring in the major things, and the major things being how you treat and invest in your people.
So you made a comment earlier in that story, and you said when you got up there, or what I heard you say is when you got up there, your initial assessment was these are all bad employees. The people are bad. Get rid of the people, bring in new people. Is that what you ended up doing? Is that what you did? Did you?
I pretty much got rid of 80% of the people.
Okay. And so you then brought in your own people, or the people
Quote,
you hired
my
new
own
people. Yeah, sure,
people
right.
People that I interviewed, and I said, okay, I'm going to rubber stamp you as being one of my people. And some of them turned out to be not my people. So
yeah. So that's
this circle being, who are bad people and who are my people, and I just, none of them were working.
Okay, so that's what I want to know.
I would get calls every month, and my stakeholders would say, "So how does the finances look?" And they look no better than they looked before I took over, at least for a time, until I got my act together. And it took me back to the time. It took me literally 2 years of getting to the place where I realized I didn't know what I didn't know. I mean, really stumbling and bumbling and fumbling. And then in year 3, right, with that change of mindset that I'm talking about, I started to deploy that thinking, and that's when everything started changing. And really what I saw my job is every day is to getting to know my people. Remember we talked about in the beginning, get to know your people. And we have a framework right for that, understand their shape. And so I just started making that the priority. And what did that mean? I had to say no to a lot of other things. I had to minor things that people thought were major things. I had to say no to those minor things. And I had to just and so, some of it back in the day, the phrase that was really popular was like management by walking around, No, it was management by sitting down and getting to know your people. Literally carving out time in my schedule and say, I'm going to spend an hour with this person. I'm going to spend an hour with that person. I'm going to spend an hour with this person. Not to tell them what to do or judge them in their work, but to get to know them as people. And it took a while because understanding here, who's this guy, right? I went from being the guy that was thinking you are all bad people to the guy that said, now I care about you. And the attitude was not because they were articulating this to me, but the body language was, well, why should I trust you? So I had to, nurture and nurture relationships. So that was the hardest thing. I went in as a fraud, and then I had to go, I'm doing it all wrong. And then I had to change who I am. And then I had to try and be something different. And they're going, well, who are you? So it was really interesting.
That is interesting. And it's the hardest change is to change yourself, isn't it? It's so much easier to try to manage other people into different different behaviors, but to actually look in the mirror and kind of say, well, maybe it's not everybody else's problem. Maybe I am the problem here.
No doubt. Yeah, I buy in fully to John Maxwell principle that says everything, let's put quotes around everything, rises and falls on leadership. I believe that to be true. So if we're looking at, whatever's going on in our universe and things are going this direction, however we define that relative to expectations, or they're not, they're going the other way, well then leaders, people of influence are responsible, and maybe they need to change. Maybe they need to grow.
That may be a tough pill to swallow for some of the people who are hearing that, but I appreciate the candor. I want to just go back to kind of that time, right? So you said, years 1 and 2 when you were up in Alaska, bad people, it wasn't working, and then things started to change year 3. I'd like to just hear, if you would, about the experiential or the emotional kind of aspect of your life during years 1 and 2, and then how that maybe changed in year 3 as you shifted your priority and your focus to your people. And then also, I'll follow that up so you can be thinking about kind of just a mechanical, and how did the financials change? When did they change? But talk to me about the kind of the emotional quality and the culture around the office, years 1 and 2, and then when things changed in year 3.
Yeah, I think, the emotional quality of the office is kind of the proverbial, when's the next shoe going to fall, like who's next? You can feel the tension, just walking through the halls. And then there were people who actually said, where do I stand? They would want to show up and say, can you help me understand where I stand in what you're thinking? And so there was a lot of concern. And with that is distraction, because then what people start doing is what? Looking for other jobs, right? Because now they're concerned about where their standing is currently, where they are. And when they feel that it's not, they're going to look for other things. They're going to go out and do other things. So I think that was it. There was just kind of this tension, I would say, was probably the best way to describe it. For me, emotionally, it was the hardest thing to do for me, even though I was trying to, be boss, is to tell people that, you're not needed here. And I wasn't good at it. I had an HR person or an HR department, and they weren't good at it either. So I just wasn't good at it. It was one of those dread things, but it was one of those, let's push through it and get through it and try and find somebody else, to do whatever that responsibility might be. And so much of my energy was around that. It was also trying to think about what could make this business work better. Traditionally in television, the way television businesses make money is by they call ratings, which represent how many people are watching their television shows. And then you have a team of people or salespeople go out and sell advertising to local advertisers to advertise on these shows. Well, needless to say, we had things like news, local news, that had no ratings, which means there aren't enough people watching that show for it to calculate a rating. And so here I am. Well, why don't we do this differently with our news? I was just throwing stuff at the wall. Why don't we do that differently with our news? So these are what I call majoring minor things. Maybe that will allow us to get an audience, and that will allow us to make money. And so it was that, right? Getting caught up in all that kind of stuff. And I would be talking to people who are news people, so they'd be looking at me, scratching their head, going, "What do you know about how to make news?" Because my background was, prior to getting there, was in advertising sales. So actually on the street selling to advertisers, advertising time. So the big shift, back to the big shift, aha was back to majoring in minor things, allowing others to come into my life and speak honesty or truth into my life, was then, okay, let me try that, right? Let me try to be more focused on investing in my people, having a framework, like I just said, for what that looks like specifically, and then how things would change. And at least I started with what I would call my core team. Like there's departments in every business. So I started with my core leaders in those teams, and I just started really investing this time that I'm talking about in them. And they started to care about what I started to care about. So I'd start having conversations about, I want you guys to understand the world that is our stakeholders, not my stakeholders, but our stakeholders, and where we need to, try and help together, come together, and try and address their needs. So I turn this from a me thing, I'm going to succeed or fail thing, and it's all up to me, to a we thing. We're going to succeed or fail together, and here's how we succeed together. And started giving their attention to what it looked like to succeed. And the way I did it was in the same way, not just bottom line numbers, but really more about who are our various different stakeholders and how do we become successful with them. So how do we become successful with our advertisers? How do we with our customers? How do we become successful with our investors? What does that look like? And I would start laying out, well, their expectations are these. Here's our expectations of our investors. Here's our expectations in terms of what is coming back to us from the marketplace of our advertisers that we're not meeting. So it became more of a we thing. Let's co-labor around solving problems that are going to help us all become better, as opposed to pointing finger, you're not doing your job, you're not doing your job, here's how to do your job better, which was my approach kind of in the first 2 years of my experience.
Well, I love what I'm hearing you say, because it really is about building camaraderie, building a unit, a business unit that gets to pull in the same direction together. It's one of the things, in the work that I do, I hear all the time from, leaders, leaders, titles, right? Well, that department just isn't doing what they did. And if they did what they did, then we could be fine and we could do our job. And it's that kind of that blame shifting that, from my perspective, is a tremendous amount of wasted time and resource, and ultimately leads to kind of the demoralizing of the team, of the workforce. And soon you have distracted people. You've got people showing up giving 20% because mentally they're checked out. Fascinating stuff. Well, I do want to be respectful of the time, and we are at time. So if you've got more to say or you want to come back, I'd be delighted to have you. This has been a blast.
Happy to do it.
So just in wrapping up, if there are folks out there right now who are hearing this and they're going, man, this guy's got something that I know that I need. You have founded or co-founded an organization to help equip individuals to grow in Christ-centered leadership. And I just want to focus on that just for a moment. Why Christ-centered leadership rather than just regular leadership?
That's a great question. I think that it really comes back with to your first question and how I think about leadership as being influence and not positional title. Here's a real model of a person who for 30 years was just a carpenter, toiling in, putting together furniture, let's say, for people and selling that. And then from there, he was in essence called to really kind of bring about human change on this planet, change the world. And so I think that as we talk about we need models for that. And I grew up a culturally Jewish person for my life, and in these areas of influence that I'm talking about, where I was feeling like I was inept, I started looking for who are the models, where are the people that I can learn from that really did it right. And in all of that study that I talked about of trying the great, who are the people who are doing it great, I started to really listen to what they were saying about who were their models. And it just kept on coming up. This Jesus guy kept on coming up as one of their models. And so kind of carry that over to, well, let me study him. Who's he and what was he all about? And, I always felt like I was in the closet doing it because we who are Jewish, have other thoughts about who this guy Jesus was. And I started to really learn some things about who he was and how he influenced that I thought made a lot of sense. They were counterintuitive to what I was seeing in the world, but they made sense. So the objective was then to put in his practices and his principles into real life. And I just found that in putting his principles and practices based on what he modeled in terms of his leadership in creating one of the greatest movements of all time that still, exists today, I thought, this is somebody I can learn from. And I have I don't have a hard time at all saying that this is my model, that this is the model. Like anything, certain things are not for everybody, but for me to put forth Jesus Christ as the model for influence and leadership of all, regardless of position or title, I just think it made a lot of sense in terms of what I've learned from him and how I try and carry that forward and impart that upon people like yourself.
Wow. Well, thank you for that share, just the honesty and the conviction, and I really I really appreciate it. And hopefully regardless of your personal creed, those who are listening today, you can hear the value in what was shared today. But if that is you, if you are someone who, as you're hearing this and you understand that maybe this Jesus guy does have something to teach you too, you can find out more at the emergingleadersinitiative.org, and that's how you can get plugged in, find out what they're all about, and how to actually really become part of a very cool community of like-minded, like-hearted emerging leaders. So Mark, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. We'll have to have you back in the future here, but thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for having me, Bryce. It was a joy just to speak with you, and hopefully if there's value there, we'll reach others' hearts as well.
Today's episode is brought to you by Upper Creative. Upper helps to align organizations from top to bottom, from leader to frontline employee, through strategic engagements to help solve your biggest business pain points, one-day workshops to build your team and work on a problem, and intelligent creative services, photos, videos, graphics, and more to tell your story and extend your reach. Visit uppercreative.com today to discover how alignment can benefit your business, boost performance, and build a business that lasts. Upper Creative. Intelligent, strategic, creative. Next time on Chief.
To put it bluntly, if it's a me versus we, you're not going to be in business for long. That's really the way. That's old school, and I think mature, modern leaders understand that getting buy-in from people, and actually not just getting buy-in, but really getting genuine feedback from people that are involved in whatever process you're running, and showing enough humility to be able to listen to their perspective and actually incorporate their ideas when it's appropriate, is critical to growth.